Luke's house in Baltimore. Host all night long, all week long, and the Baltimore Ravens taking the field for some fake football against the Redskins. As I say to Luke Jones, it never feels fake when the Redskins are coming up here, but between now and then, there will be baseball. There will be late-night baseball, and how about that Ubaldo Jimenez, right, Luke Jones?
Yeah, 12 base runners allowed in 5 2/3 innings, and yet he gives up 1 earned run. Certainly wasn't a pretty performance, and certainly you look at that kind of line and you say there was definitely some good fortune mixed in there, but made some pitches when he needed to, got a couple double plays, and it was a competitive start. Look, the bar is really low for Ubaldo Jimenez and Wade Miley on Saturday night, quite frankly, but what they were able to give them, it's not impressive. It's not something that's going to inspire a ton of confidence, but it's competitive. And the way this team has been swinging the bat here of late, it's good enough to give them a really good chance to win. So as discouraging as the start of this series was, specifically what happened on Friday night with just a great effort by Kevin Gausman that was spoiled by the grand slam by Justin Upton off Michael Givens in the 8th inning, you wondered if that was going to be the kind of the gut punch that sent them reeling a little bit, much like that Cubs Friday night loss, and then they laid down the rest of that series to begin the second half.
Well, it always sucks when you snatch defeat out of the jaws of victory.
Sure. But they were able to bounce back and win these final 2. They get back to 1 game under 500, and now they go to the West Coast in what's going to be an absolutely huge road trip. They do well. They come home, and they're back up over 500, and the rest of these teams that are kind of in this wild card picture continue to do what they've done, which is seems like all these teams, they'll win 4 in a row, but then they lose 3 of 4. They kind of hover around 500, really all of them. If the Orioles can go out to the West Coast and say go 7-3, you do something like that, I think everyone's talking about them as a wild card contender in a much different context than we are now, which is, okay, mathematically still in decent shape, but a lot of work still to be done.
I know Adam Jones was, tweeting about going home, but this is a business trip here now. 3 in Anaheim, including an afternoon game on Wednesday. 4 in the land of Oak over the weekend on the east side of the Bay and the Dump That Jumps, and then up to Seattle and Safeco early part of next week for some more late-night baseball. This is, traditionally, and you and I have been friends for a long time. We've been talking about baseball for a long time. This is when you are getting sleepy, very, very sleepy. And then you got preseason football on Thursday. A lot of people will sort of go nighty-night on the baseball team here during the course of this week. But to your point, this is where they really need to put the foot down amidst some good weather and some relatively mediocre baseball teams. I mean, they're not going and playing the Yankees and the Red Sox, and they're certainly not playing the Dodgers this time around L.A. But the Angels are almost a mirror reflection of the Orioles in a lot of ways, in that they don't really know where they are. They have some guys committed to a lot of money. They don't have enough pitching. The Angels, in their case, lost a lot of their pitching to injury. And then there's this Parker Bridwell character that we heard about for a number of years, and feels like he made 100 starts at Bowie or Aberdeen. He was always sort of banging around and goes out the side door, and the Orioles are going to have to contend with him on Tuesday night.
Yeah, it's going to be really interesting to see him. I mean, it's been a great story for the Angels. I'm still not convinced that it's real.
Neither is anybody else, by the way. I mean, they had a 5.5 ERA at Bowie. I can't be too down on the Orioles, but I did watch Jake Arrieta, so,
You never know. You never know, that's for sure. And certainly you look at that, and it just makes you kind of pull your hair out to say, would have liked to have seen them give him a longer look at the very least, just like we talked about Ariel Miranda last year and some other names that have escaped me. Zach Davies never got a chance here with the Orioles before he was traded for Gerardo Parra. But getting back to your point about the Angels, I mean, this is a team that the Orioles are battling with right now. The Orioles are a half game ahead of them. They're a game behind Seattle, who they're going to see on the final leg of the road trip. It's not just playing well enough to get back over 500 and to put themselves in better position in the context of just looking at the wild card race, but these are 2 teams that you can hurt in the process. So it's going to be very interesting in that regard. And as much as we've talked about the Orioles, just a couple weeks ago, there were 5 or 6 teams ahead of them. Well, they've moved ahead of teams like Minnesota, and they're just ahead of the Angels. They've moved ahead of the Rangers because they played so well against them over the last couple weeks. So what their goal needs to be on this trip is to do to the Angels and the Mariners what they did to the Rangers here recently, and that's move ahead of them, and you kind of, not necessarily bury them, but you really put them behind the 8 ball, and that's what the Orioles have a chance of doing here. I mean, you look at it, they're 2.5 games out of the second wild card right now. They have a chance. Is it a great chance? I still would be very skeptical to characterize it as that, but you go 7-3 on the road trip, and suddenly things are really starting to look up because you've handed some of those other contenders losses in the process. If you go 5-5, 6-4, you're still skeptical. If you go worse than that and you have a disastrous field trip, then you're probably coming home and everyone's kind of in the mode that we were talking 2.5, 3 weeks ago, where you're saying, yeah, it's not looking good whatsoever. So they have an opportunity here, and I think quietly, since that Cubs series, this team has played pretty good baseball. They've gotten better pitching. Hasn't always been great, but the starting pitching has been good enough. The bullpen is certainly in far better shape. Michael Gibbons' hiccup on Friday night notwithstanding, with Zach Britton being healthy, and hoping you can get Darren O'Day straightened out. Had a good outing on Saturday, and certainly Brock and Gibbons doing what they've done over the course of the season. That looks like more of a strength. And then they've really swung the bats well, and I guess we'd be remiss if we didn't mention Tim Beckham, the spark plug that he's been in his first 6 games with the Orioles. I mean, he's been terrific. 7 extra base hits. I mean, he's hitting over 500. Clearly, he's going to cool off, to a large degree, but you kind of see the talent, and you remember he's 27 years old and
number 1 overall. That sticks to you, right?
So, you just wonder, okay, maybe this can be that guy. As much as we've kind of looked at the Jake Arrieta narrative and how frustrating that's been for Orioles fans.
Dude, I pissed him off last week. I called him a 4A ball player. So, at this point, he's going to hit 320 the whole time he's here. You watch.
Yeah. I don't know about 320, but...
He's going to strike out a lot. I know that much.
He's going to strike out, but he's shown some impressive power, and he's played solid defense. Made a terrific play to end the game on Sunday. I think that's something that's a question mark relative to what we've seen for years now with J.J. Hardy, who... isn't a Gold Glove caliber shortstop anymore, but was not too terribly long ago, and certainly is a very smart defensive player out there. You want to see Beckham make the smart play, and Buck Showalter even cited at one point during Sunday's game where he took a shore out at first base rather than trying to get the runner at third when he had a big lead. When you have a big lead, take the shore out. You want to get those outs. You'll give up a run, or you'll give up an extra base if it means you're going to get a sure out in the process. So I think you have to be really, really impressed with what he's been able to do. And 27, and this is a guy who has clearly had his bumps in the road, but I think you see the talent. And no, he's not going to hit 350 or 400, but you like the upside there to kind of pair him with Scope up the middle. Certainly you have Manny Machado here through next year at the very least, at least contractually speaking. So you kind of like the idea of adding another young infielder, and he's really been a nice spark plug for them. And you get the sense, being in that clubhouse, that some guys have already taken a liking to him. Definitely brings a lot of energy when he's on the field, at least in the early going here with the Orioles.
Well, you can feel the energy around the ballpark a little bit this weekend, specifically on the backside of Friday night and losing. And I know they gave away Scope bobbleheads, and they're all over the internet, and they drew 30,000 people. But, people feel like they're dug in, and for all the wrangling back last Monday on the trading deadline, it is a little burst that they won a couple of games against a legitimate team in Kansas City, and I know they struggled in the early going against Detroit, but there is some energy here from the deals, and they aren't necessarily playing bad baseball. As a matter of fact, when they're going out and getting the kind of starts they've had where they're in games and it's not 5-0 in the second inning, and when there's 2 guys on in the first inning and Jimenez is pitching to the middle of the order, you're worried about it being 3-0 because we've seen a lot of that. As long as there's a survival factor into the 4th or 5th inning, I like their chances to hit the ball, and they don't need to hit 3 home runs in the first inning like they did on Sunday,
sure,
but they are going to do that a little bit, especially at home.
Yeah, and you're really seeing, we've seen Jonathan Scope continue what he's done. We've seen Trey Mancini, who fouled the ball off his knee, missed the game, and kind of looked a little bit shaky at the plate for a day or two. But he goes deep. He continues to be terrific. And the guy that has really taken off is Manny Machado. He's hitting .352 since the All-Star break. We saw him that final Minnesota series, had a couple good games, got the average up a little bit from where it had been. I mean, this is a guy who was hitting .217.
Yeah, I mean, he was hitting into 2-0-somethings, and now he's hitting .250. I mean, that's hard to do in 100 at-bats, really, right? I mean,
yeah, in fact, it was .217 on July 6th, and at the close of business on Sunday was up to .257. So he's raised that batting average by 40 points, and it's a combination of two things. One, I do think he's hit it into better luck. We've talked about that a lot. As much as we can talk about the approach, and we'll talk about that in a moment, you look at his batting average for balls in play, you look at what his exit velocity was and where it was ranking among the top hitters in baseball, and then you saw what his average was, and how could you not say, well, he's hit into some bad luck? And certainly we can go back and look at a number of balls that he hit right on the screws, but right at fielders. And you know what? That's going to happen. You're going to have stretches like that. Sometimes you're going to have extended stretches like that over the course of a season when you're playing a year in and year out, like Manny Machado hopes to have in a long, productive career that, who knows, maybe has him in the conversation for Cooperstown 10 years from now or 15 years from now. But it's been that, and I think you saw a good example of this on Sunday afternoon. And he's done this. This wasn't just a one-game thing. Singled to right field in the first inning. Next at bat, doubled to right field. Third at bat, hits the home run to dead center. I mean, we're just seeing him hit to all fields. We've talked about it all season, and we've seen times where it's very clear he was trying to pull the ball, and other times where he probably was trying to go the other way, and it just wasn't happening for him because it can be difficult when you're in a funk trying to get out of that. But you've been seeing more and more over the last month when he's been hitting 350 plus. He hasn't hit a whole lot of home runs. Only a few home runs over that stretch. It's been more singles to right field, doubling to right center, hitting the ball, using all fields, and just having a much better approach. And you see how dangerous, how incredibly talented this guy can be at the plate when he's willing to use all fields the way he has over the last month. So, he's not going to hit 350 the rest of the season, but you're hoping you're seeing the start of what's going to be a very consistent second half for him, and maybe he can finish with a 270 average. When you consider where he was at the All-Star break, that would have to be a pretty impressive accomplishment. But he's just he looks a lot more comfortable at the plate, and he's just getting those results. And some other guys have been swinging the bats well also. Adam Jones, it seems as though him being in the leadoff spot, as much as he is not at all the prototypical leadoff hitter, it seems like that's helped him some. He's been swinging the bat better. It's just, it's been really encouraging to see. Trumbo's been on the DL even over the last week plus. We know Chris Davis has had his ups and downs, did hit a long home run on Sunday, but we know
everybody hit a home run on Sunday, right?
But yeah. But it's just been, you've kind of been seeing it up and down the lineup. Wellington Castillo, a big blow on Saturday. Caleb Joseph has swung the bat so well. It's been really encouraging to see that. And even Joey Rickard had 4 hits on Sunday. So when this team's swinging the bats the way they are right now, and I don't think you can expect 4 or 5 home runs every night, but they've won some games here recently where they haven't hit home runs. They've been swinging the bat well in general. And it just goes back to what we were saying from the beginning of the conversation, what we've been saying all year, what we've said for the better part of the last 3 or 4 years, really. When they get decent starting pitching, competitive, it doesn't have to be great. It doesn't have to be top 5. It doesn't even have to be necessarily top 7 or 8 in the American League. Just don't be dead last by a full run the way that they have been for a large portion of the season. And they give themselves
they can score 4 or 5 or 6. They can't score 9 every night.
Right. I mean, I think it's a fair expectation to average for this team to score 4.5, 5 runs per game. And let's be honest, they didn't do that for a large stretch of the season. It's only been really over the last 3-4 weeks where they've really started swinging better. But if they just get representative pitching, 5 or 6 innings, 3 runs, even 4 runs on occasion, over 5 or 6 innings will still give you a chance to win. It's just these starts, like, unfortunately what we saw with Chris Tillman on Thursday night and what we've seen too many times from just about everyone in the rotation, other than Dylan Bundy, who, of course, had his bumps in the road over the last 6 weeks or so. But just be competitive. And if they get that with the other strengths that are on this club, I give them a decent chance. If they can, put together, what they've done now is great, but can they sustain that here over the West Coast trip, here over the rest of the month of August, and get themselves into, closer to Labor Day, above 500 at that point, then it's a sprint the rest of the way, and then it can be anyone. But the thing that I've said to you, even as we've both been very skeptical, very pessimistic, quite frankly, of the Orioles' chances.
No, you're skeptical. I'm pessimistic. I've read about it on the internet.
Well, they were awful for a long stretch of time of the season.
Well, if you look at the stats and the pitching and you see no cavalry, you automatically say if they're this bad in May and June, what's it going to look like in August and September? And the pitching has improved. Therefore, they're still alive and very much so out on this West Coast trip, even though we're all going to be asleep.
Yeah, and you look at it and you say, okay, there's no cavalry, and I agree, but Kevin Gausman, a 0.65 ERA over his last 4 starts, and he's been terrific. And like I said, the bullpen let him down Friday night, but that was as good as he's been, other than, I guess, his previous start against Texas when he almost had the complete game. So, he's been pitching better. Bundy was much better his last time out. That was good to see. We know what the story is there, how they're going to try to get him a little extra rest when they can, although now with Tillman being in the bullpen, perhaps that complicates things a little bit, although Miguel Castro pitched really well out of the bullpen, and they stretched him out, and who knows, maybe he gets a spot starter.
Well, you wondered how bad Tillman was going to have to be in order to get himself out of the rotation, and the answer is I don't know that there's ever been a longer leash in the history. Jim Palmer, Mike Flanagan, Cuellar, no one had a leash to 8.5 in August. No.
Yeah, well, and I guess the thing you would say is how many of those pitchers, and look, I'm not comparing what Chris Tillman did over the previous 5 seasons to McNally or Cuellar or Dobson or
they were never that bad, or unless
they were never.
Palmer wouldn't have been that bad if he would have come back after he was already in the Hall of Fame, which he tried to do.
When he made his comeback.
His ERA wouldn't have been 8.5. The Orioles wouldn't have let it be 8.5.
And that's what's just so frustrating. And Buck Showalter even spoke about this earlier in the series when he hadn't yet made it official that Tillman was going to go to the bullpen. He flat out said, when you have a guy that has a track record like that and he struggles like that, it's both a blessing and a curse. It's a blessing from a standpoint of you want to see it through. You've seen him pitch so well. You have the thought that the track record's there, that he's going to figure it out. But it's also a curse because he does have a track record, and you continue to go down that road when it's clearly not happening. And we'll see what happens. I know there's probably some people listening just to say, well, designate him for assignment. He's going to kill them in the bullpen, even though they're carrying an extra pitcher right now since the...
You played that game with Jimenez off and on for 4 years, right?
Yeah, and look, I'm not saying I'm going to predict it. I think we're all very skeptical about the health of his shoulder, although he insists, and even Buck Showalter was very candid about it, said, look, I see what everyone else has seen as far as the performance. We've asked him so many times if his shoulder's okay, and he says it is. And he said, to be totally honest, I've known Chris Tillman for a long time, and I don't think he would lie to me. And again, we've talked about the semantics with this. Is he hurt from a standpoint of, is he feeling pain when he pitches, or is he feeling healthy from a standpoint of there's no pain, but he's had to alter his mechanics, or the strength isn't there in the shoulder, or whatever it might be, and that's what the problem is. I don't know. I mean, the truth may be somewhere in the middle. Who knows? I mean, I've talked about it. I know Fangraphs wrote about it a couple months ago about Chris Tillman not having the same over-the-top arm slot as he once did, and I'm sure the Orioles have talked about that with him. I'm sure they've tried to work on it. I would hope so, because it's clearly been a difference in how he's delivered the baseball compared to him in the past. But the reality is, when you're in contention, and for better or for worse, how serious it is or not. We'll see. I think the West Coast trip is probably going to give us a decent idea of that. You can't run a guy out there who has an 80 ERA, no matter how much he's meant to you, no matter how much he had been a bulldog, and the rock of that starting rotation for the better part of 5 years. I mean, this is the guy that you counted on to be your stopper. This was the guy who was the de facto ace, even if he was never a pure ace in the context of the rest of Major League Baseball. So I understand wanting to go with him as long as you can. Did they go too long? Yeah, sure. I mean, it's easy to say that. I mean, you look at the numbers. But one, they didn't have too many alternatives that you turn to until they acquired Jeremy Hellickson, and hopefully he can build on what he did in his first outing with the Orioles, which was pretty darn good. And two, it just gets to a point with Tillman. I mean, it's just you're hoping to see. There have been some times, there have been some stretches, albeit very brief ones, where even I talked about it and wrote about it, that maybe this is where it starts to turn around. The velocity spikes a little bit, the command's a little bit better, gets a couple decent outings under his belt, but then it's right back to being the non-competitive version of Tillman that we saw on Thursday night.
Well, now he's going to be coming in at some sort of mop-up, right?
Yeah, and it's going to be interesting to see how this works now because, he's, Showalter over the last couple months, and I think there's something to it. Tillman's a guy who's been someone who probably takes a little bit longer than the typical starting pitcher to get loose. He's always been a guy that, and I think it's always been evident by how he pitches in the first inning. Even when he's been at his best, keep in mind, first inning, usually kind of shaky for Tillman where you weren't always sure what you were going to get. It's just in the past, he would settle in and pitch really well after that. But you wonder how that translates to the bullpen. Even in a mop-up role, you still can't have a guy sitting there warming up for an inning and a half or 2 innings. I mean, at some point he's got to get in there and pitch in a reasonable amount of time. So, one, I'm interested to see how often he pitches. Two, I'm interested to see if it helps him. We've talked about it as much as Ubaldo Jimenez has been so maddening for most of his Orioles career. There have been a couple examples where he's gone to the bullpen for a time and then he figures things out a little bit where he's given them some serviceable outings. So, you hope that's the case with Chris Tillman. And let's face it, as much as we're talking about Miley and Jimenez giving them some competitive starts here recently, and certainly over the weekend, even if it wasn't the prettiest thing, both of those guys are a couple terrible starts away from being in the same conversation as Chris Tillman. Let's call a spade a spade. So,
no one here should be safe, right?
Right,
Literally.
right. I mean, I think just based on what you're seeing now, you're hoping that Hellickson, Bundy, Gausman, they kind of give you a top 3 that you feel okay about most of the time. I mean, Gausman's been excellent for 4 starts now, and you're hoping that continues. It's kind of what we saw in the second half of last year over the final 2 months or so. But beyond those 3, I mean, you're talking about Jimenez and Miley. 3 weeks from now, we might be talking about one of those guys in the bullpen and maybe giving Chris Tillman another chance, or maybe they're giving Jason Aquino a chance at that point. Who knows? But as Buck Showalter pointed out, it's easy to pile on Tillman, and certainly an 8.10 ERA. It's not piling on. It's just stating fact that he's been awful this year. But there have been a couple other guys in that rotation who have been awful for large stretches of this season. So if you're going to ask me to bet right now, I'm guessing we're seeing Chris Tillman at least starting at 1 or 2 more games at some point here between now and the end of the season, just because I don't trust the other remaining members of that rotation, at least on the back end.
He is Luke Jones. He is Baltimore Luke out on Twitter. He will be up late in Anaheim watching some Orioles baseball here from Baltimore, I should say, and certainly will be with us doing fake football on Thursday with Ravens and Redskins. You can find him, Baltimore Luke, on Twitter, as well as Luke at WNST.net. You can find me in the Buy a Toyota Audio Vault 24 hours a day from anywhere in the world on your mobile device by downloading the TuneIn Radio app. Don't forget, any breaking news happens first on the WNST Tech Service. Dennis will be here on Thursday doing the SSV on WNST from 3 until 5. That's all brought to you by Coons Ford, just like our tech service. Nasty at WNST.net finds me, Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, Snapchat, Instagram. We are headed to London next month. If you're going to London, make sure you throw me an email, nasty at WNST.net. We will get you on all of our facts for our Saturday hootenanny over there in Londinium on the 23rd of September. I am Nestor. We are WNST.net, AM 1570, and WNST Towson, Baltimore. And we never stop talking Baltimore sports.